Hello! I've reviewed a bunch of robot cars in the past, and today I'm doing one as well. This is from a company called Elecrow, and it's called the Crowbot BOLT. And there's a difference in this one. First off, it's pretty inexpensive. It's at a good price. It's pretty simple, it's got two wheels to drive and the sort of little balance wheel at the back, which doesn't do anything. Got the sort of regular sensors, ultrasonic, I think it's got a line sensor, a light sensor, that sort of thing. But the interesting thing about this one is it's built around an ESP32 chip. Normally these things will either have a quite large Arduino board, so you've got the board and then you've got the shield on top, or I've also done ones with the Raspberry Pi, which are almost impossible to get hold of at the moment. And I thought that's quite interesting because I had a quick look at the web page, and that shows that they've built the ESP32 chip quite well onto a sort of single board, and I thought that makes it easy to put together. The idea of these is they're great for kids. It's got like the Steam thing all over it. They provide some lessons about doing experiments in 3 types of languages. They talk about LetsCode, which I think is the sort of block-based thing, General Arduino, and MicroPython, which I don't think I've tried before. I might have to have a go at that. It also says that this has an I2C interface, and they produce a load of I2C boards, and so I said, send me one of those and we'll see if we can hook it up afterwards. But what I'm going to do first, we're going to go to close-up, we're going to unbox it, we're going to put it together, see how it works, then we'll look at how this can attach, and I don't know, you haven't tried it, and we'll work through some of the exercises, see how it is, see what it's all about. So let's go to close-up. So before we get started, just a quick word about who Elecrow are. Aside from making their own components and others that they sell on their website and kits, they also do PCB prototyping and assembly, 3D printing, CNC milling, laser cutting, amongst other things. And the Bolt is actually a fully open source product, so if you didn't want to buy it and wanted to make your very own, you could go to the website, you could download all the design files and the source code and put it together yourself. They also very kindly sent me this lovely little project pad and pen, so I can make my notes in there, because when I'm sketching things out, I literally like a proper thing to sketch with, and some stickers, which we'll have to put on our completed robot when we get there. Okay, let's get this thing out of the box. Sometimes I like to peek in the box to see what's there, and I did have a peek in the box, and then I thought, oh, I'm not going to be able to get all this stuff out. There's a lot in there, and it's all packed. So, first thing we got are the assembly instructions. One sort of big page, preparation. I mean, it looks pretty basic. The fact it's got this single integrated board, it looks like you just mount the motors and then you're pretty much putting on the casing and the wheels. But oh, it's got a little thing to go around with the line sensor, so that looks fairly simple. So if we get under here, we've got this little remote control in bag number 1. Oh wow, it's already mounted. I thought we'd have to mount this. This is the main board, and this has got kind of ball bearing that's at the back, so only the wheels drive it. And we've already got the motors on here. Got the ESP32 all on board, so this is really nicely integrated board. There's really nothing much to build there. There's the I2C interface that we talked about earlier, all good. Bag number 2 is a battery compartment, so it takes 4 AAAs there. Looks like a piece of cut acrylic to peel back. In this bag is the ultrasonic sensor made into little eyes there. The wheels to put on. Some screws and standoffs there. A USB cable. See the USB-C on the back there. Screwdriver. Connecting wires. This is actually an optional extra. This is the joystick. And we've got various bits for the joystick there. Normally it would just come with this, so I'll ignore that bit for now, and what we'll do is get and put this together. It doesn't look like it takes much effort. So yeah, step 1, we're going to put the battery holder, connect that to the chassis and put the batteries in, so let's do that. Okay, in fact that was just about putting batteries in and connecting it. The actual putting it together comes on stage 2, where we put these other acrylic bits on, which I did find, I thought they were part of the joystick, but they're these bits. I have to say, it takes longer to take the paper off than it does to actually connect it, but let's do that bit next. So that's that part done. I would say a little bit fiddly, just because you've got all these parts that slide into one another, and you've got to kind of keep it, that extra pair of hands needed. If you're getting this for a kid, something to help them with, but I'd say if you were getting this for your son or daughter, work with them on the build. That's the kind of fun of it, spending some time together and learning together. Anyway, next on, I mean, we've almost finished. We've got to build the wheels and then lastly connect the ultrasonic sensor so the wheels look like they just push in. Let's get on with that. The wheels are on. They've got a kind of flat point so you know how to push them on, and that's going to stop them just twisting by themselves. So that's looking good. Last thing we've got to do is put the ultrasonic sensor on, and the longest bit of that's going to be peeling this bit off. Now the ultrasonic sensor just literally dropped down to a few contacts, so this whole thing had 4 screws and you can build it in about 10 minutes. And that is it. This was quite an interesting story. I got this and I got it out and it had one of those little protectors, you pull out to connect the battery, but it didn't actually have a battery in it. It's a CR2025, which fortunately I had. So if we turn this guy on now and check the basic functions, so we've got the directions, the turning, and we've also got the pre-programmed stuff. So line tracking should be number 2. If I just put it there and press number 2, the fact keeps falling away. Look at that, did quite a good job. Could be a little bit more efficient with the algorithm it's using there, but it's certainly doing it. How do I stop it? Perfect. Well, I think the thing to do now is to have a look at some of the other functions, see what else it can do, and then see what we can do to customize things. Now here's the pieces for the joystick. That is a little see-through bit. I've taken the paper off. There's instructions to download to build this. That site seems to be down at the moment, but it looks fairly simple. I noticed it's got this little OLED screen part here which fixes on there, but I think what happens is you plug that in, you put the buttons on, the standoffs go this side to lift it up above those, and yeah, I'm just going to try and put it together as I think, and we'll have a look. Okay, joystick all built. I just use a picture to decide what coloured buttons to use there, and since that time the website's come back to life and I've double checked I had everything right. You just put batteries in the back once again and you're good to go. Well, here we are downstairs in the kitchen, just to show you the more basic functions. I've got a little bit more room here. As we mentioned beforehand, we got the basic left, right and turn, and we looked at the line chasing function. We've also got a couple of things. One is just the music playing button, which is button number 4. So we face it this way. It plays Jingle Bells. Got the 2 LEDs in the eyes and another 4 underneath there. Let's stop that one. We've then got the ultrasonic obstacle avoidance, which is on button number 1. So let's face it that way, see how it does. Well, it avoided stuff. Well, it works alright actually, that doesn't it? Except when it gets to that wall there, which didn't do so well. Although the IR receivers on the front, it seems to do quite a good job there. I just came out of that and brought it back to myself. The IR receiver's right there, so I guess it probably bounced off a thing. So yeah, obstacle avoidance, good to a point. Didn't see that wall over there, but this stuff was okay. Oh, there's a couple of buttons here. This makes it beep, and this turns the lights on and off. And if you hold them down, it flashes. So the other one we had was a light chasing robot. Okay, so light chasing robot is button number 3. Let's try that. I'm gonna try that with my iPhone light, see how that works. Come right then. Alright, that seems to work, but you need low ambient light for this to work, which kind of makes sense. Company. And it goes quite reasonably towards the light source, I think. Then you've got this mode that's listed as Robot on Patrol 3-in-1, which I don't quite understand what it does, but let's try it and see. Press 0 for that one. Well, it's going backwards whilst playing Jingle Bells. I don't know if this is trying to do a line sensor thing as well. Let's have a look. It is trying to do a line sensor thing. So it's going to play Jingle Bells whilst flashing lights and chasing the line around. Okay. So let's also talk about the remote control we've got. If well, we need to use this at the bottom here. You've got two buttons, one for Bluetooth, one for Wi-Fi, which you can turn on like that. They haven't actually written a Wi-Fi implementation, but it is there, so you can expand on it. If we then turn it on, it will basically wait for a Bluetooth host. So let's do that. And then what we do with this guy is also turn it on. And you can see that OLED nice and clear. And we're into it, and what happens is it even tells you the direction it's going as you go. Now, although this is like an analog feeling joystick, there's no proportional control in it. Basically, we just, whether we press hard or soft, it goes the same speed. But we've got essentially the same functions. So, can I remember which is which function? I think, well, let's try. I think, is this line follow? Let's have a look. No, I think that's obstacle avoidance. So it's doing its obstacle avoidance, it's not doing a bad job. So let's cancel that, which we do by pushing the stick in. Actually, I should just look at the OLED, shouldn't I, to find out what the function does. So let's try the yellow button. That's line follow. Okay, it's found the line. It's doing the line follow. Obviously, if you want to do this over more space, put some tape down, gaffer tape type stuff on the floor, and you'll be fine. Cancel that. We've got these side buttons here. Focus. This one turns the lights on and off. This one makes a noise. And then we got the other two modes, which are Showtime. Plays this little melody. Cancel. And finally, blue light seeking, which I've got the lights on, so that's not going to work so well. So the joystick's a little bit better for steering. Obviously, you've got a little bit more control there. So it's got something to say if I'm going forwards and right, turn slightly. If I'm just going right, more of a faster turn. But it's a bit more controllable. It's not a necessity, but certainly you can have some fun with it. And this can be also programmed through the USB port as well. So that's the basics of this little fella. What I'm going to do now is look up the programming lessons that they give, which they give in 3 types of languages, depending sort of how old this is intended for. If it's a small child, the block program is going to be better. If it's someone who's done it before, you might like the normal Arduino programming, and you've got the sort of in the middle, the MicroPython stuff. So let's go check that out.
Moving on to the programming now, and what I've got here is the Crowbot BOLT Beginner's Guide, which tells you all about the lessons. You can download all the lessons for the 3 languages all in one big zip, and they all have the same structure, but it's only the LetsCode stuff, the block stuff, that's actually documented in some way. And the documentation is pretty good. You see that here you've got all the general lessons, but it's not quite as basic block programming as some of the stuff I've seen before. So I'm just going to zip through this. It tells you how to get the software to do this, and you have to put an extension in. And then it talks about like connecting the car and uploading code. The most important thing about this, I feel, is this table here, which has all the various buttons, the RGB lights, the motors, etc., etc., and very importantly the I/O numbers they correspond to, which be familiar to anybody that's done Arduino programming, but slightly unfamiliar to anybody that's done sort of very much the block programming. It's also got a explanation of the joystick, because of course you can reprogram that as well, and it then goes on to the it tells you about how you can customize the control, but it talks about the very first function, which is like pressing a button and saying it's been activated. And if we look at the program here, it's very much looking like an Arduino based program. So we're setting the serial port to a baud rate, we're setting a pin to be read. It feels like a very block representation of much more normal programming, which is a little bit different to normal. So this document doesn't set out to try and teach people how to program. It sort of says this is what we're doing. So you can't come into this without any knowledge about anything. It's very important that you've got some sort of knowledge here. LetsCode itself I've downloaded. There's versions for Windows, Mac, which I'm on, and Raspberry Pi, which is quite cool. A couple of little annoying bits in the UI, like you can't stretch that over, so some bits appear and come out like that. This came in Chinese, and there's still certain bits that do seem to be in Chinese. I've just told them about this one. If I say load from your computer, you'll see some of my folder names are still in Chinese, the dialogue is still in Chinese. I've sent that back to them. Let's see what they can do. But the first thing you have to do in this is set your extension down here. So basically you can use this block type coding for pretty much all sorts of like Arduino based and microbits and gubbins like that, all sorts, because what it essentially does is turn this into normal Arduino code. You see now this has changed, and it's like there's a language bit up here, and these things are specific to Bolt. So if I was to start dragging blocks in, I've got my setup, and if I say, I don't know, just random stuff, you will see that it's starting to produce output here. And let's set this, and it literally translates the blocks into code. So it's not abstracted that much. It's not that much different to programming. There's some certainly easier things here than doing all that, but it's not that far off. And so if we look at the first lesson they gave us, which is called Activate Bolt, I think that's open. So that little bit of block programming is completely changed into regular code. So if I now go ahead and plug in the robot and connect this in the software, I just happen to know that this is my serial port. First off, I'm going to set the baud rate to 115. I want to upload my code. Let's see what happens. Code upload fails. Try again. Okay, something's going on. It definitely looks like it's writing to an ESP32. So what I'm going to do now is press that button. Okay, pressing button now. Well, something came up, but it doesn't look right, does it? Okay, so I've just rebooted it and it's gone ahead and worked. So what it does, for example, there is set a challenge saying each time the start button is pressed, Bolt says a word and introduces himself to the host. So that's pretty good in terms of like, okay, so we've got it, so it does it once. Obviously, we'd go put that in a loop, and our finished code might look something like this. Let's go ahead and upload that, and this time we can press it as many times as we like. And that's kind of the idea. As you work through these lessons, you get extra skills that you've learned, and you can do different things. And I kind of like the fact that it is showing you what's going on in this section here, because it gives a very easy progression towards looking at your Arduino based coding, which is essentially C. As I said, it really doesn't hold your hand too much about how to do things and really how the hardware works. It just sort of gets on with it. Now, something that's really important to remember is when you upload anything to this, and you can see me just pressing the button at the back and it coming up with the info, that is now the program. So it won't do anything else now. We've overwritten the base code with our program code.
So if you're working through the programs, that's absolutely fine. If you then want to take it and play with it, you're going to need to reload the original firmware on top.
Now, although there's something in LetsCode in the last chapter called Comprehensive Application, where it looks at the infrared remote control and it puts it into various things like moving and obstacle avoidance and tracking, which is pretty much most of it, but not all of it. This isn't complex enough to write the stuff we need to have the full application. So if you want to restore how it was, you will need to go to the Arduino IDE, and the source code for it, which is included, is about 1,300 lines long and is just in one file, which sounds pretty big, but an awful lot of this stuff is just setting up the Bluetooth communications, which takes quite a lot. And you can see it's pretty easy to jump in there and start messing around with things if you like to. So that's not a bad move at all. Now, one thing I haven't talked about is using Python instead, and it's because it seems a little bit more remote from the other stuff, I have to say. It's like Arduino is almost like the language you'd want to use, and the LetsCode sort of feed in that very much. When you talk about putting on the Python IDE, you're talking about getting an IDE like Thonny, and then what you have to do is upload this very specific binary file to the ESP32 to change the firmware, so you can start programming in it through the IDE. I have to say it's not all that dissimilar to using Arduino, just from the fact that because you're using all these libraries, it's done in a certain way. It's a little bit more friendly, I'll give you that, but I decided not to mess with Python for this one. So I do kind of like the lesson structure here, where it goes through different aspects of the robot, shows you some code and how to do stuff, and then sets you a challenge about it, which I think is really good. It does give you essentially the answer to the challenge, because it gives source code of one way of doing it, and it gets progressively, more and more stuff, and you can go ahead and basically try and re-implement all the functions you like, with extra stuff to work on the infrared remote control as well, so you can do stuff like add more functions using those unused buttons, which is all very good and I think pretty cool. As I said before, I don't think it's quite like, if you've never programmed at all before, or if you don't know the concepts, you're going to be a little lost there. And this is where, like, if you're an adult that does know this and you want to get it for your child and they don't know as much, this is where you'd work on it together, and you'd have to do a little bit of teaching and explaining what's going on to really understand it. But I think as soon as the concept about, you're talking to specific pins on the board, and these pins do certain things like, operate the RGBs or the motors or stuff like that, I think you'll crack it pretty quickly. So I thought one thing I wanted to do is look at how I'd add an extra thing via the IC2 interface. Here's the robot, and I've got underneath, there's the IC2 interface, and what Elecrow sent me is this little OLED screen. It's 128 by 64 pixels, and it's already got the correct plug to just plug in. Of course, you have to do some setup to make it work, and I'm going to run over to the Arduino based stuff, see if I can figure out how exactly to set this up, and then I can sort of print some interesting information to this. What I'm going to do is use the base code and extend it a bit, perhaps put a couple of extra options on those unused buttons I've got on the infrared remote control while I'm on there, just for a bit of fun. Now, as I mentioned, before I can start playing with this code, we need to get this base code loaded back onto the robot. Now, there are some very specific instructions about how you set up your Arduino environment. You're using a bit of a weird board. You're going to need the ESP32 packages and the very specific board that then gives you, called the ESP32 Room DA module, but that's explained in a PDF. I've already gone ahead and done that, and this is where I ran into a few problems. So let me just show you the first attempt of uploading. And this is what I got, which looked like a really weird problem trying to upload it with this ESP tool that goes. Now, I finally found out, and this could be the fact that I'm running on a Mac, it could be the fact that I'm running on OS X 11, but what I found is the upload speed was wrong. Essentially, it defaults to 921,600. If I set that to 115,200 and do it again, this looks better. A lot slower, but better. However, my problems didn't end with the upload. So as you can see there, it's all uploaded okay. But if I go ahead and try and make it go forwards or backwards or go into any one of the modes and do anything, nothing happens. So what's wrong? Well, fortunately there's a little bit of debug built in this. They're using serial print lines quite a lot. And so if we go on a serial monitor, we should be able to see what's going on. So if I now go ahead and press a button like forwards, you see we're getting a load of Fs. And a load of Fs is one of the things it looks for. If we look at the infrared remote control section of them, there are many. It tries to decode results, but if the results value is all Fs, it basically doesn't do anything with it, throws it away. The IRremote control thing looks for specific cases of different things for forwards and backwards and that, and we ain't hitting this. But why not? Well, what I decided to do is try and track down what this thing does here. And we can see it's type of object IR receive, which we're having a reasonable guess is part of the IRremote library. So I went to find the Arduino IRremote library on GitHub just to have a look to see what's going on. I noticed there was a big thing about converting version 2 and version 3 programs, where the old program has very much what we look for, the .decode passing through the results, whereas the new one, the 3 or the 4 program, has an IR receiver .decode, and then you just call different things to make it work more. And what I figured is, where my libraries are kept up to date, this could have well been originally compiled with an earlier version of that library, uploaded to the robot, which worked fine, and then when I come to recompile it and upload it, it's possibly got the newer library, which is pretty easy to find out. If we go to the library manager and we look at the IRremote, we've got version 4. Right, so we're trying to use old calls on a new version, so that could give spurious results, and they could look very much like gibberish. So what I did was look at the new way you would write the code, something like that, and what I'll then do is just get rid of this stuff quickly so we don't have to think about it, and we'll try and upload this again. At this point I'm not really looking for, like, you know, this will fix it straight off. I'm trying to get something other than, you know, all Fs back from the decode of the infrared, because that all Fs means it's gibberish data essentially. Okay, that's uploaded, but I'm pressing the buttons on the remote, nothing's happening. So if we go into the serial monitor and press forwards, this is better. I'm getting stuff. So let's press backwards, left, right. I'm getting data here. So why isn't it moving? Well, seems to be that the values have changed. When I first looked at this, I press forwards again, and you see it's E718FF00, and this is FF18E7. I thought it was a case of the bits being reversed, but if I press backwards, that's AD52FF00. That's nothing you can get to that. So what I then had to do is rewrite this to take in all the new codes, because every single one had changed, and there was 10 different instances of where they actually read the remotes, so I changed all that as well. I've passed this back to Elecrow. I told them the problems and what I thought they did. I showed them my solution and gave them the full source. I'm hoping they'll update their factory software with that one, else essentially people are sort of bricking it unless they really know what they're doing. I haven't received word back from them then, but as soon as I do, I'll either let you know in some pop-up in this window or on a description. Anyway, I'll show you what that code looks like later, but what I wanted to get onto, of course, is plugging in this OLED screen and seeing what I could do with it. Now, I don't know much about programming OLED, so I thought I'd share this part with you because it was a little journey for me to go off and find out stuff and learn things, and I kind of think that's sort of the fun of this. Aren't they cheap? $5.50 for a little OLED. Only, as I said, I think 128 by 64. Oh yes, written there, look. But, you know, usable for these sort of projects. Anyway, I wanted to know what this was and how I go ahead and program it, and there is a wiki link here. So if we go to that, we get this wiki page. And what's the wiki page tell me? Pretty useful stuff. It seems to tell me how to program it using this thing called U8glib. so I figure I just have to put that in and do stuff with it. Although I do remember that we had reference to some OLED stuff, recognising that bit there. If we look up here, we've got this UG82, and it's sort of same sort of thing, using a different size. And if I look at that, there is reference here to U8G2, which sounds like a slightly updated library. So I went to look that up, and yeah, it seems to be a library there. So then I looked at the setup and reference guide, and I have to say the one that took me a longest time to understand was how to get the right board defined. I mean, this stuff here is all nice and useful. So what you had to do first is to get the right constructor for your board, which I was a bit confused about. I mean, we were in pretty good shape here, I think, knowing it's something to do with SSD 1306 12x64, but this was all a bit different, and it took me a little while to find out the right one, because there are aspects about how it connects. On our one, it's software I2C, and then how the pins work. But what I basically found out is this guy, which means, yes, it's the SSD 1306 100 megabyte 64. I'm guessing it's no name because it wasn't anything specific. That means something. That's software IC2, and then fortunately this had done it quite nicely. So if we look at the bottom of the robot again, we can see that our clock is pin 21, our data is pin 22, and that was a great way of setting it up. From that, it was a case of running some of this basic code. Essentially, you have this small loop here where you can write out hello world. So I did a hello world, that seems to write well, and then I thought I'd check to see if I had a good 3 lines, which I kind of should have, because I figured, you know, it's 64 pixels and that's enough lines for a font that's 20 pixels high, for example. And that seemed to work well. So I decided what to do is try and give a status for the robot. So if it's going forward, it should tell me. If it's going to a mode, it should tell me. And this is what I ended up with. So you can see we've got the little OLED mounted just with a bit of blue tack, nothing special. And what happens is we've got the basic mode it's in. If we press stuff like lights on, lights off, or the beep. Now if we press forwards, it's a little bit hard to see. Backwards. Now what you might see there is it starts moving before the forwards thing comes on, and that's because the OLED's very slow. So first I had it so it would show on the OLED and then start driving, but that would be like a second has passed. So in this case it actually starts going and it updates it as it goes. But we've got no such problems if we put it in the modes, like if we go into lights and music, it'll start going away, doing its thing. If we put it in the ultrasonic mode, off it pops. And what I decided to do, when I was looking at ultrasonic mode in the code, it actually can calculate how far it is away. So I made a new function and I put it on number 5. And the idea is it's a rangefinder. So it doesn't do anything, or it doesn't drive anywhere, but it tries to work out how far it is away from something. So if I face it towards here, as it is towards the wall there, it reckons that is 41 centimeters away, which is about right. If we go a bit closer, 26 centimeters. If we turn it around completely, where it's a good metre and a half at least, we are seeing it say, let's have a look, try not to get in the way of it. Oh, no, I got in the way of it. 153, yeah. So that works quite well. I thought that was a fun little thing to do. Yeah, so if I just suspend it off the ground so it's a bit easier to see, we've got forward, backwards, turn left, turn right, and then we've got the lights on, lights off, beep, and then we got the mode, so ultrasonic, line follow, light seeking mode, the lights and music mode, the 4-in-1,
And finally, as I just said, my range finding mode there, where I'm sitting that far away. Let's put that in front. It's a bit different. Yeah, so I'll briefly go over what I did in the code, but not in any great detail because it's a little bit dry and a little bit hard to read.
Okay, well here's the code we ended up with, and I've made the font a bit bigger so it's hopefully a little bit easier to read. So we had this one which is our constructor line, which was the tricky bit to find. I then made this little bit called my OLED stuff, where I've made some global variables to hold my 3 lines of text. I've had this boolean as well called update needed, depending if it's stuff like when you're going forwards you don't want to do the update straight away because it delays you sort of, controlling. In our new infrared remote control procedure, where we've replaced all the old hex cases with the new ones, you can basically see every time we do something we're saying okay, we're saying forwards, we're saying reversing, we're saying turn left. On these ones I changed this OLED update needed equals true. We'll come to that bit in a second, so it's not actually doing anything at the time. I've got my own little procedure here called update OLED, and that does the code necessary to draw the 3 strings out to the screen. You see this is X and Y coordinates, so it just draws them further down. And this is the loop that happens when it's doing IR stuff. So the first thing we say is, do we need the OLED update needed? If so, go ahead and do it. That basically does the update at a point where the motor's already driving, so you don't have to wait for it. Otherwise, what we do, and this is the new code for doing the proper decode, is like if we go into ultrasonic mode, we turn it on straight away. We change the lines, we do the update OLED, and that's it really. It's not too tricky. It was fairly interesting to find out how it worked. Yeah, but I thought it worked quite well. The OLED was just a little bit slow to update, that's the only thing, so I needed to kind of work around that and work within the confines of how this code looked already, which is slightly different to how I would have done it, but you can go from scratch really. That's kind of the fun of it.
Okay, well there you go, that's my little Crowbot with his little additional OLED screen on. And of course, if you're interested in different things, different sensors, different ways of reading stuff, you can just get them and add them on the same way I did this little OLED. And out of the box, it's quite good fun. You can drive around with that, and then you can jump into the programming about doing different functions, making different things happen, and understanding how the sensors he has work, which I think is quite nice. Little Bluetooth remote's pretty nice. It's not a necessity, but good to have if you want to. And in the same way that I did with the remote, pressing a button could do a different thing if I changed code here. But you've also got the code on here as well, which you can change to your heart's content and completely change the way it works if you want to. That's available to you. One of the obvious things to do with the little ESP32 chip is maybe hook it up to Wi-Fi, and then you can do some completely different things from that point of view. As I said, the Wi-Fi implementation hasn't been written. It's just a case of adding a few libraries. A while ago, I used to have this little ESP32 doing this ticker for YouTube. And then what happened is YouTube changed their API, and now it doesn't work anymore. But this connects into my Wi-Fi. It goes and asks data for YouTube, and YouTube says no, essentially. That's why I've got 0 subscribers and things. But that's just an idea. That way you could potentially control stuff through your computer, or you could, for example, go and have this fetch a tweet or a news report and show it on the screen or something like that. Anything you like really. As I said, it's not ideal for absolute beginners who have never touched anything like this before, because there is a little bit to dive into about understanding like pins do certain things and they have a certain way of programming them, and it's really written, even though it's block programming, it's really written around Arduino, so knowing a little bit about that would really help. But as long as you know the basics, going into Arduino and messing around with it's really quite simple. Anyway, I had a ton of fun with it. As I said, it says on the website it takes about an hour to build. In reality, it takes an adult that knows what they're doing about 10 minutes if you weren't filming it and stopping every 2 minutes to do so. But yeah, there's not many bits. It really goes together easy. I suppose if I was nitpicking, my complaint would be it ought to change the batteries, which in there, I have to unscrew the side, take that off, get the batteries out, and then put it all back together again, which is a bit of a pain. That said, it hasn't run out of batteries yet. It said it only gave, sort of 2 hours of driving around and stuff, but I've accidentally left this on for like 40 minutes, but because it was just sitting there, nothing bad happened, so it's still on my original batteries, believe it or not. Anyway, thanks very much to Elecrow for sending this over for review, and you of course find a link down below for where you can check this out if you want to. You might be surprised with how affordable this is. It's the most inexpensive one I've came across, but it doesn't lack in any of its functions and abilities. But definitely recommended if you're interested in this sort of stuff, or you've got a child who might be getting into programming and thinking about how to mess with physical objects and things like that. All good fun. Anyway, hope that review's been helpful, and I will catch you next one. Bye for now.
Well, you've made it to the end of the video, so thanks once again for watching. If you like what you saw, then please consider subscribing, and if you really like what you saw, then be sure to check out the link to my blog for a variety of ways in which you can help support this channel.